Hello, hello everyone, and welcome to England. Changing the global for a better global society. Thank you for joining us today. I am here in Seychelles, and the rest of the panel is globally represented. Before we begin this podcast, I would like to acknowledge those who are joining us live through social media. And to all our global audience, particularly on LinkedIn, thank you for being here with us today. Today's discussion is going to center on the contributions of diaspora remittances to sustainable development. It is impossible to speak about sustainable development in emerging worlds without looking at the issue of remittances. We're all well aware that remittances not only contribute to the economy, but it has become a lifeline for many because it is their only source of revenue so that they can survive. And in many cases, contributions go to their micro businesses. In this past year of 2022, we are told that the amount of remittance that has come to the African continent is over $100 billion. Much of this goes to sub-Saharan Africa. And no surprise to those of you in Nigeria that Nigeria is the largest recipient of remittances. It is estimated that though the number dropped since 2018, it is still at over $20 billion. In some places, there has been an increase in remittances in Rwanda, Kenya, and a few other countries. Interestingly, I am told that South Africa also sends remittances to other African countries, which is of no surprise to anyone who is here today. Nifemi, thank you for joining us as always, and I would like you to just take a moment and introduce our guest today.
Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you join us again on this episode of the Thinking Reimagined podcast. Yeah, add to that, Dr. Amma, that we've seen an upsurge of the number of African citizens seeking opportunities abroad, especially in West Africa. So the figures you're quoting are expected to increase significantly in the coming years. Last year was $20 billion financial inflow into Nigeria. It's expected to increase as much as 26 million in 2 years. Welcome again, everyone. Let's talk about the contributions of diaspora remittances to sustainable development. We're joined by Stanley Onwara, the online banker, financial advisor, passionate about small businesses, fintech, and the economy. Stanley is popular on social media for his creative way of empowering people with financial knowledge and impactful information. I will be gleaning more of that on this episode. Stanley, thank you for joining us again.
It's good to be here with everyone.
We're also joined by Enyidea Uwaojike, who is the CEO of Overgroup. Overgroup is an international consultancy based in the UK and Nigeria, and it offers pragmatic financial advisory and project management solutions. She's also a director of Ohafia Microfinance Bank. She's the forensic auditor, Commonwealth businesswoman. She's coming on the podcast this hour with over 20 years experience in the financial service industry, a certified consultant in banking, finance, and allied matters. Thank you for joining us on this podcast today.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. And we must not forget our executive director, Nifemi.
Executive director, you're talking about co-producer, Dr. Amma?
Yes, our co-producer, excuse me.
It
must be the fresh air from Seychelles.
Dr. Amma is joining us from Seychelles, entrepreneur, behavioral consultant, and resilience coach. She's the immediate past chairperson of the British Business Group Nigeria and currently chairs Africa Sustainable Trade. Thank you for joining us as well, Dr. Amma. Peter Amanboyo is here, co-producer of the Thinking Reimagined podcast. Mr. Boyo is an actor, a filmmaker, an art director, and the list is endless. Mr. Boyo, I'm sure will also join this conversation because I want to assume that you have contributed tremendously to the $20 billion that Nigeria gained in the last year from remittances.
I'll leave that one to the panel. Well, thank you all for joining us. And once again, if you're joining us on live stream, we welcome your questions, comments, and interactions. And don't forget to follow us on Thinking Reimagined and follow everyone on the panel. It's going to be a great, insightful discussion. And welcome again to Thinking Reimagined.
Well, thank you for that. Welcome to everyone. You know, I want us to start this conversation really based on the figures that we've just had. And we know that those numbers possibly, according to the World Bank's report that I just read recently, the numbers could go up by about 1.4% of that sort. We don't have the numbers for this year, but it's expected to go up a little bit, although there has been a decline in certain countries. But I want to start by posing a question to Stanley, the online banker, as we would continue to address him over here, because we're not even sure if these figures are absolutely accurate, given the fact that some of these transactions are occurring informally amongst families and friends, so not necessarily going through the central bank in the manner that the policy has been written. So we're not really capturing all of the data, are we?
Yeah, we are not. Thank you, Dr. Ama. Thank you, everyone, being here. What's happening currently in Nigeria is that we've seen the export of Nigerians to every other part of the world. And with that export, we expect inflow to have increased across board. But there are factors that you can highlight why the remittances might have dropped. Maybe you could call about the inflation around the world. So the inflation has spread around the world. So a lot of people are trying to balance their life. They're trying to live. So, you know, they are sending less money. So that's on one part. But the major problem that has happened in Nigeria, I'll use Nigeria as case in point, is that the rise of cryptocurrencies, especially the stable coins, and the policy of the government has created a friction. Within that aspect, there's been a gap. And that gap is where the young people have seen an avenue to make something for themselves. So you see companies, fintech companies that have come up to fill up that gap. And what is that gap? You want to send money from the US to Nigeria, you want to go through Western Union, or you want to go through RIA or one of the IMTOs, the International Money Transfer Operators, that you want to send money to your mother in Abuja or Lagos. Now, if you were to go through that route, you go there, fill up this form, get this code to send to that person. They ask you, are you sure you're really sending this money to someone, due to the nature of Nigeria in the international space, about internet scams and all that. So all those procedures, you just send your money in quotes, and then they've made it easier, you know, with the apps and all. So people don't want to go through the stress. What they do is that they go and buy USDC or USDT. With USDT or USDC, if I want to send $5,000, I buy USD. So USD is a stable coin is a cryptocurrency that is a stable coin. So you just take that USDC and you ask the person for a wallet, create a wallet with Binance, create a wallet with any of blockchain or any of them. And once the person has a wallet, the person sends it to you. In less than 5 minutes, you've transferred $5,000 worth of USDC to that person. There are Telegram channels that buy this that's all they do. I know companies in Lagos they have staff strength of close to 20 to 30, and that's just one. There are numerous companies like this that all they do is buy these stable coins from people around the country. You advertise this on WhatsApp or your story on Facebook, on Instagram. Oh, I have $5,000 USDC to sell, and somebody's bidding at the current market price. So the current market price at the bid or the rate that it is, the parallel markets. We're talking about the black market, not what the central bank is quoting in the I and E window. So you are selling this. All this transaction can take you less than 20 minutes. Now it has cut out that bureaucracy that you'll have gone to entail that you have gone through if you're going through the traditional banks. And because the young people, most of the people that are now sending back this money are within the ages of, say, 18 to 50. So they are more tech savvy. They are looking at the avenues that will be hassle-free for them. And that has created an informal market for remittance in Nigeria. And the CBN has actually decried this. They've come out to say, oh, they're going to sanction these people but there's nothing they can really do unless they create policies that enable the average man to walk into the bank and make it seamless for them. And that way you can attract them. And they have actually these tools. And I think that the new CBN governor that is coming up in Nigeria will look towards that. That way the inflow comes into the country, counts for the country. It helps the Naira in the long run because, scouting as remittance and all that. And then it's being disbursed so you have proper tracking, you have proper reporting and all that. So that's part of why I feel like the remittance in Nigeria, the figures that we have are not reflecting as much as the remittances that we're getting.
Now you brought up so many very valid points. You've talked about technology, the use of technology and how the youth use technology with great ease. You've also talked about or referenced the fact that we're not keeping accurate data, but you've also spoken about how remittances are insinuated that remittances do help the economy. And we know that for a fact, because in many cases, if you look at the remittances that are coming into our country and you look at the imports or the exports, it doesn't quite balance out. So there is power in these remittances to the economy, and therefore essential in terms of growing businesses or also growing development in a country. What do you think are some of the things that we should take into account to improve the ease of doing business so that these types of avoidances, for lack of a better word, actually become part of the seamless process and transaction so that it is captured? Because at the end of the day, if you can capture all of this information, doesn't it make the country more viable for foreign investments?
It does. So you pointed out two things, and I'll just like to address them. So one is that you mentioned that the remittances count for the development of the country, and that is actually what it does, because most of the money being sent back are sent for different reasons. So one of which is that most people are sending back money to enable their family members start up businesses, SMEs. So I tell my uncle, I just finished school. I'm not doing anything. I want to start up. I have this business idea. I think it will cost me about $800,000 to start. He says, you know what? I'll send you $1,000. Or you have that across board. So it's a form of funding for MSMEs that is supposed to help rejig the economy. So it's in itself, it's a development. And that money coming in comes into even FDI, people trying to build real estate. I tell my uncle that, Abuja is a really good spot right now for you to invest your money. I think you should build a unit of 5-bedroom flats across maybe Gwarimpa or one area. He says, do you really know this area well? And he starts to send money for this building to go on. So that's a form of FDI, foreign direct investment into Nigeria. Mm-hmm. Now, for the government to be able to capture this, which counts for us as a country, we need to look at the policies. What have we done to discourage? What have we done to create a disconnect? And one of which is that we had excluded certain items from, being able to access the forex. Where I said you can't transfer anyone. For you to go to the bank, you can't just walk into the bank and say you want to open an account. So I'm going to use domiciliary accounts now. If you want to open a domiciliary account in any Nigerian bank, you go to the bank, ask for account opening form. When they are done filling the account opening form for you, they will tell you that they can't give you dollars or euro or yen or whatever currency that you're trying to, because they have about 4 in Nigerian banks. They will tell you there's somebody outside they will call, probably one malam, that will bring $100 for you to the bank for you to open your account. So this is the bank telling you to go outside the bank to credit an account you're opening with them. So that disconnect is not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be, I walk into the bank, I say, oh, I have 50,000 naira and I want to open an salary account. Like, okay, take this money and they aid you in funding your account within the bank. That way it creates a trust system and it will shut out some of the black market players that ordinarily would have taken out this information that the banks would have been able to house. So we as a country, we should look holistically at some of this approach. Still, there are still reasons for KYC and other things that the banks will look at. But one, it's something that we can do and do very well. And I think they will look into it pretty soon.
You know, you mentioned what I would reference as inclusivity of multiple players. So it's not just for those who have, you know, corporate businesses or small to medium, because many of these businesses you're talking about and references are micro businesses. You know, the funding that comes is for micro businesses, micro to small. So integrity is important in terms of having that relationship and that trust, but also inclusivity. What about the stability of the currency? Doesn't that also affect the remittances that are coming into the country? And Uwa, please join the conversation, please. Are you muted? Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry, with regards to your question and the informality of most of the remittances, the online banker also forgot to mention one other source of informal channels, friends and family. There was a report done by Rapid that 50% of actual remittances through informal channels are larger than what is actually recorded. So it was done by DP Rapid and everything. So in terms of his idea about cryptocurrency and everything, that might be for, like he mentioned, for an age, a generation of between 18 to 50. Unfortunately, some people are also not so tech savvy that they actually use those means to do some remittances. I remember some time ago that the CBN introduced some programs in which to try to encourage remittances to Nigeria. That I think Naira for dollar, where for every $1 you receive, the bank in which you collect the money through the IMTOs will pay you 5 Naira extra. Unfortunately, the objective of CBN was not really seen by the people, the beneficiaries of the remittances, because some of them wanted to receive the dollar being sent in foreign currency because of the exchange rates different in the, like now, for example, if you're buying exchange rate from the bank, it's less than if you're buying it from a black market. So some of them will want to go collect the money in dollars instead of collecting it in Naira. So that's objective in which CBN introduced that program, we did not really fall through. They also introduced one they call the RT200 program, where for exporters, for every dollar you receive in non-oil exports, you are paid 65 Naira. Then for, like he said, some of the items that are not registered, you're paid 25 Naira. So I think remittance, as far as I'm concerned, is actually very, very, very important, both in economic growth and even as an individual. Because remittances, sometimes, like he said, some people will call their uncle and aunt, oh, I want to start a business. Can you send me this money? Because I remember a project that our company was told to do in 2018. We're supposed to set up a palm oil factory. The mentor, that's my client, was a retired pensioner. He wanted to go to his village, but he has been so busy working all his life. So he was like, well, I can't go to my village and not do anything. You need to set up something for me to do. Most of his children are not in Nigeria. They're all working abroad. So I was like, okay, no problem. Let me come and see what can be done in your area. And most of his village is a rural area, it's agriculture. there are palm trees growing everywhere. When I mean everywhere, literally, if you walk 2 steps, you're seeing a palm tree. That's how we came up with the idea about setting up the palm oil thing. But as usual, he didn't have that enough equity to do it. So he decided to fall back on his children. And like the online banker said, they now decided to remit money to us to be able to fund those things. And the palm oil factory is doing so well where it has employed 80%. It has improved the locality of the place where the palm oil is located. Where a situation where a villager who couldn't even speak English can actually tell you the different parts of a machine. Dr. Ma, can you still hear me?
Hey.
Someone else here.
Oh, sorry. It was quite, I thought I'd lost everybody. Sorry.
No, we're still here. We're listening.
Okay. So, and even for example, if time will permit me, I can play a video, maybe some during the stuff of where we did an interview of one of the staff that could explain the use of a machine. This is someone that before then, he didn't even know how a machine looked like. He didn't even know how. I'm amazed because sometimes people don't know the importance remittance actually contributes to the economy unless you're part of the conversation, unless you're part of the transaction. Because we started the project from start to finish, I could see the difference that factory is an SME, is a startup, because we started from scratch. We incorporated it, we bought the equipment, we did the personnel recruitment and everything. I could see the impact that money that his kids sent as remittance to him, because to them, I'm trying to make my dad happy. But they don't know that the remittance they did had a multiplier effect on the community, because this is a community where then they could, if someone is paid maybe gets 5,000 naira in a month, they feel like a king. But yet, when we started the factory, some of them were being paid 40K a month, and some of them could roof their broken houses, thatch houses, and could send their brothers and sisters to school. So in my view, whenever I remember, there's a report that IFAD did some time ago on the contribution of remittance to economic growth. And I see that it was able to it contributes to at least 7 of the SDG sustainable development goals. It contributes to no poverty, zero hunger, quality education, economic growth, clean water, to mention just a few.
Well,
Hello?
we can hear you, and we agree very much with what you're saying, is that remittances do help in terms of the potential for economic growth, and of course for people to be gainfully employed, and touching on some of those SDGs. But you brought up something very interesting, and I think the online banker as well did, when he talked about the use of cryptocurrency and other avenues of carrying on these transactions, that it's so informal. It's not part of the traditional path that these transactions occur. But part of that reason, I would argue, is that the cost for having these transactions is exorbitant. When you think about the fees, those fees that people must pay to have these remittances come across can be quite steep. And so going to their families or using crypto becomes a viable option. Certainly one that does not take into account, or is not taken into account when you look at the actual figures for a country. Now, my question for you is, how do we increase the transparency of these kinds of transactions? If it does improve the viability of a country, because it is contributing to the GDP, if it does if the country becomes more attractive to foreign investment, how do we now begin to capture this data because it is certainly viable and important for further investments in the country.
Okay, is that to me?
Either one of you. I mean, we're having a
okay.
discussion. We're not having,
okay,
this
yeah.
is not a panel, it's a discussion. So any one of you can
Okay,
answer the question or be part of it.
With regards to that, because I know that, for example, the gaps in statistics from several countries might be due to different policies of the different countries. Like, for example, what is applicable in Nigeria might not be what is applicable in the UK. So unless, I don't know how possible it is, unless they standardize maybe the policies with remittances, like, for example, in accounting, there's a standard uniform way of doing accounting records in all countries and everything. If they can apply something like that to remittances, I believe that can help too, because that is also what causes. Hello.
Yeah,
That's also what causes most of the issues there. Mr. Online Banker, can you add to that, please?
Yeah. So I'll honestly take it up from there. So part of to take it up from you too, creating a standard across board for the banks as a means of like reporting is one. The secondly, like she mentioned, like transparency. So we need as a country, we need to look at what is peculiar to us, our own system, because one of the challenges that we do have is that we create templates from other nations, that have done something similar, and we just apply it blindly. We're not looking at, okay, how does this work for Nigeria? What are the peculiarities of Nigerians? And how can you break this down, even breaking it down to zones? If you come down to Nigeria, most of the remittances that come into the country can be broken down further. When you bring it down, say, okay, remittances. Now, sorry, can you hear me? I think I see doctor's mic is on.
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm wondering, even me myself, I'm wondering.
Yes, you are audible.
When you break down the remittances into the country, it's now even different. It's broken down into the north and the south. Then when you look closer from the north and the south, it now comes down to the regions, the southeast, the southwest. When you come down to the regions, the type of remittances that come into those sectors even is broken down further. If you go to the southeast, for example, when you move to the southeast, a lot of money sent to the southeast goes to burials, traditional weddings, and building houses in villages. So you notice that when you look at it when you break it down into the spectrum, you can say, okay, these people are sending out remittances for mostly construction work, mostly buildings. How can we look at something tailored for the country that can attract more of this to this area? Since we know that this is what they do, is a national policy. You come down to the southwest of Nigeria, a lot of the remittances still comes down to, burials, weddings, and then businesses too. Just like in the southeast, they do a lot of businesses. So I wouldn't take that out. Businesses are cross board around the country. But I'm now specifying, okay, these are some of the things that are more prevalent in these areas than this. So how can you create a national policy that addresses the whole nation and then addresses to each region as they are? And then how can you, for the people that are lacking behind, how can you take the examples that you have from the remittances in this area to apply it as a national policy to attract more of that investment? That's one. Then secondly, we'll go down to the method of collection. So while you try to free up, while we try to create our reporting system for KYC to make sure that there isn't fraud, we are not allowing people to try to defraud people outside the country using remittances as an excuse so that anybody doesn't just send money, which is some of the policies that the banks already have. Now, the country can come up with a national policy, one of which is we already have BVNs, we already have means of identification. that you can liaise directly with other countries, that you as a sovereign nation, you're taking this, okay, tell these people to just send money to BVNs. And then at the point of BVN, we know how we're going to cascade it down. Just make it easier. Walk into any bank with your BVN or with just your name and go and do your biometric. You must do your biometric capture when you just go and use your thumbprint, or they use your face, because your BVN has all that. And you receive your money in any bank, no stories told. So now it cuts out some of the things that you would require people to have technology, people to have maybe smartphones and all, which some people are excluded from, because not everyone has access to a proper smartphone. So people still use the Nokia, the touchlight phones and the rest. So, but most of them do have BVNs because they have regular bank accounts. Even if they don't have accounts with commercial banks, they have with microfinance banks close to them. So that way it takes out that bottleneck and reduces the chain and helps that remittance. So we as a country, we need to create a national policy that addresses this. I would say that if I was put in charge, we should have a ministry for remittances. We should have a ministry of diaspora and remittances in Nigeria, because for remittance to account for close to 40% of or 30% of your inflow as a country, it's important. It's something that you should pay keen attention to. But I don't think we're doing that.
Perhaps we should just, expand the responsibility of NIDCOM, Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, to cover that. Opening up new agencies would just mean, opening up pockets to siphon funds. So following this conversation, I'm able to, see that first we've established the importance of remittance, from the figures and, the examples we have quoted. We've also talked about fine-tuning the process. And I think that's where the online banker talked about, someone raised the issue of minimizing the transfer fees. I just wanted to call our attention to the fact that it's even an SDG, it's a sustainable development goal, particularly reducing it to, I think the figure is less than 3% by 2030, the transaction costs of migrant remittances and things like that. It's hard to tell how committed countries of the world are to that goal. There's also, the responsibility that comes with taking such initiative back at home in Africa. But I want us to explore another interesting angle to this, because we're looking at the funds. We're talking about money sent for businesses and things like that. Can we also, how important is, remittances in form of skills and knowledge and learned experiences? Our president has been in quite a number of countries recently. The last place it was is in the US, on the sideline of the UN General Assembly. And at the presidential town hall meeting he had with Nigerians in diaspora, he talked about the need for them to return home. Usually when people return home, they think of returning home as, now I've made some money, let me go and build a house or start a business. But how important is the skills, the knowledge, in different areas and sectors of the economy? How impactful do you think it would have? I mean, how much impact do you think it will have, returning to Africa? Perhaps I can explore that a little.
When you asked the question, what came to my mind was the ADB forum that was held in December, where the president mentioned that African governments need to create opportunities for those living abroad and those that want to come back, so that they can contribute meaningfully to the national development. Because most times, whether we like it or not, people don't leave because they don't like Nigeria. They leave because the circumstances and the situation or living conditions in Nigeria does not help them or does not favor them being able to take care of their families. We are putting 3 square meals on the plates of food on the table, being able to give good quality education to their kids. So until we as a government, create those opportunities, I don't think that many of them will want to come down. Like look at, for example, look at the health industry, for example, a situation where even our politicians, instead of going to a Nigerian hospital, will prefer spending money to go abroad to cure themselves. Do the people, as my dad will say, do the people abroad have two heads and we don't? I think that is a very, very, very important thing we need to create, because for you to come back, you have to come back to something, because you cannot come back to nothing. And he mentioned, I remember when he was saying that since the inflow is rising and is a bit stable, it has been rising and is going to be stable, that African countries should look at a situation where they can secularize the funds and get financing for African countries. That means they will use the funds as collateral. Because imagine a situation where in 2022, the remittance alone was 5% of GDP. You can use that to go and get money, cash, as they call it in banking, cash back lending. Or then you now use that money and create infrastructures in the country. Because I'm sure if it's you, if you have a good job in the UK and you don't have anything to come back to in Nigeria, would you come back? And if
No.
you wouldn't. So they need to create that opportunity in Africa for you to want to come back, because it's that I'm leaving to go and make my life better does not mean I love Nigeria less than I love where I'm going to.
Talking about creating opportunity.
I wanted to,
Africa.
Nifemi, I don't know.
Okay. Talking about creating.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Yes,
No, go ahead, Nifemi. I think Nifemi was saying something. So I'll just wait for Nifemi to complete his statement.
I just wanted to follow up on what we were cited about, creating structures and opportunities back at home for individuals who have gone out to return. We've talked about how remittances have helped poverty, reduction, human capital development, entrepreneurship, and the rest. But the other side of it that is hard to tell if, we have quoted the figures, $100 billion, $20 million in Nigeria in the past year. But have we also been able to evaluate and account for the issues of volatility, of dependency, how much we're losing to brain drain, and several other governance issues? So instead of saying, let us create structures back at home for them to return to, are we not even going ahead of ourselves? Perhaps we should begin by creating structures to retain the resources who are in a haste to leave, because we're looking at this from the point of view of those who have left. Are you also considering how much Africa is going to lose with the rate with which young people are leaving our country and other countries on the continent?
Yeah.
Nifemi, you bring up a very strong point. I don't know if I'm audible, but am
yes,
I audible? There are many important points that have been raised so far. And these are some of the things that we at Africa Sustainable Trade are addressing as well. Africa is a young continent. And whilst much of the conversation is focused on Nigeria, we have to remember that we're a global platform and people leave their countries, whether it is Africa, whether it's India, whether it is the Philippines, they leave for a better life because they don't feel secure or they don't feel like there are opportunities. So it becomes incumbent to create those opportunities and to give people the viable skills and education and investment in the local economy. When we continue to speak about remittances that are being used for weddings and funerals and all of those things, they're not actually going to yield. Once that money goes through that system, it's gone. We need to encourage people to use these remittances to educate, to start businesses, to scale their businesses, because that's the only way that you can begin to see growth. Otherwise, it's a one-stop channel in terms of the funds coming in. I have to tell you, it is raining right now in Seychelles, and I may have to move because I actually sat outside for a different podcast. But if it continues at this rate, I will have to take a few minutes to go inside. So in terms of sustainable growth, the funds that come through, if you're lucky to be able to leave and you can remit money to your family, then it is incumbent for your family to invest that money into a business, into education, into skills, because we want people to stay. Don't forget this. People continue to come into Africa, and they come in because they see opportunities. If they can see those opportunities and you've got the population, there has to be a merging point. And that is part of what people should begin to see. The greatest export from Africa is people. The greatest import should be education, skills, and the people who will merge to create an economy that is not reliant on remittances. There's a heavy burden on remittances. And I think that is also affecting currency rates. It's affecting the ease of doing business. It's affecting the attraction for others to come and invest on the continent.
I'll take it from here. Like you made excellent points. Just like Nifemi pointed out, we could use a country like India as a case study. India was able to create an education system that encouraged IT, and they became an export hub for IT jobs and IT personnel around the world. So it's evident in the CEO of Google and the rest, and and top tech firms. Now it has created another wave of people coming back to India to see how they can develop India. And that is where, just like Uwa said, it comes down to the government. There's limits to what we can do as individuals. It still then you need the government to enable that return. And that return is just creating the base for companies to say, you know what, we have Nigerians that are in their numbers in the US coming back. Okay, Nigerians that have done there are so doctors or healthcare providers in the US in their numbers saying, oh, we're coming back to bring something similar to healthcare in Nigeria to become a hub. And you have other African nationals around the world that have similar skills that they could bring back to their countries. But you don't want to come back to a country where you are done setting up and 5 years later, there's no consistency in policy, or there's no consistency in ideas within political parties and the rest. And there could be a friction and you are either hunted down or shut down. So we need that consistency for people to know that, okay, even while we have gone as an export from Africa to the rest of the world, and we are trying to bring back our skills, our resources back to develop the people that are back home, there's an enabling environment, and not just that it's an enabling environment, that it is consistent and sustainable. So it's something that we, as the conversation still keeps on going, that we still need to, because conversations like this give rise to policies, give rise to ideas, and I think we should keep having it.
Well, I'm so glad you said that. I think, Uwa, you are muted.
I wanted to add something real quick.
Please go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. We've been talking about remittances, but I think there's a lack of education to the recipients or benefactors of these remittances, because I'll take Nigeria as an example. Receiving remittances is not a gift, as most Nigerians think, or somebody sending money from abroad and they squander that money. They don't think about what that money is supposed to be used for. There are many cases of remittances being misused or stolen or siphoned or whatever. And also there's also the, we didn't talk about, the physical or informal remittances, which is people actually carrying cash. I don't know how much of that is data is acquired or anything, but I think we should also talk about that a little bit, the education of the recipients, because a lot of people just think they're gifts. My brother is abroad, he's sending me $, end of story, cash cow.
So
Okay,
I think what you're referencing, if I may, Peter, is people who become dependent on these
Yes.
remittances because they expect them every month. And so why go and find a job? I mean, in some cases, they're very limited jobs, but why put myself out there when I know that X amount of money is going to come every month and I will have access to it to survive, as opposed to X amount of money is coming and I can use that to invest in myself by starting a business, by getting my education, by learning skills, and hopefully creating, like the online banker mentioned, hubs where young people come together to develop something. When you think about businesses, the businesses that are started by individuals is group of people coming together to do things, cooperatives, those kinds of things are important. So the owners is those who are sending it to be mindful of what they're sending and the purposes that they're sending it for. At the same time, to hold people accountable for the funds that they're receiving so that they're implementing in ways that improves their livelihood, as opposed to becoming a dependent. I mean, why do people want to become dependent? The person who is working abroad is also working to make this money. Incidentally, we didn't talk about this, but part of the reason why there's a decrease in remittances, which people don't talk about, is the inflation. Inflation is affecting everyone. So if you're abroad, you're dealing with inflation, you're dealing with the high cost of living. So you're sending less than you would have 2-3 years ago. And you're also dealing with the taxation, the taxation that you have to do. The more money you earn abroad, the more you have to pay in taxes. So to shrink the amount of funding that is coming over here. Something crossed my mind when the online banker was speaking, talking about investments. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if the channels that people are using to transfer these funds, if a percentage of it, 1%, 0.5%, 0.05% is set aside, and we create funding possibilities whereby micro businesses are able to tap into that to grow their businesses. Isn't that going to be a positive thing that can be done, as opposed to handing over the money and then I take mine? I've collected my money and I move on. But a joint thing where the person who is sending the money and the company that is being used, they split a 1% and it goes into a fund. Of course, the next question you're going to ask me is, who is going to manage this fund to make sure that the business that are coming vetted? But it is an idea and it's a concept, because at the end of the day, we are talking about sustainable development, not sustainable gift giving, not sustainable aid. And there's a lot of aid that comes into the African continent, but we can see that the remittances even exceed the aid. So it is possible to grow the economy. It is possible to develop the country. It is possible to develop youth and children properly so that they can then add value, because that is what we want, for people to add value to their country, for the people to have a sense of value and for them to grow economically, because that makes them viable individuals and then they want to stay. Security, many people leave because of security and the challenges of underemployment and unemployment, and those have to be addressed, most definitely.
Sorry, you brought up some issues. I would like to make my comments on it. With regards to exporting the skill back, I would like to give an example. Like, for example, the project our company was working on, the company that the OEM that we bought the machine from, one of the engineers is from Cameroon. He left when he was 16 to go to school and everything. So when he was talking, because he was speaking French and everything, so I actually assumed maybe he was there. He said no, that he's a migrant, that he left there to go to school. And I said, okay, why don't you want to come back? You have worked with Rentec for 10, 15 years. You've acquired the skill. The next question he told me is that, well, if I come back, where am I coming back to? that what he does is that he tries to make sure that most of the equipment that Rentec does, that they install it in African countries. He now ensures that he's part of the team so that he'll be able to now impact his own skill, the skills he learned from them on the African or rural villages in which they install those equipments.
Recording in progress.
That buttresses my issue about creating opportunities. Then with regards to what Mr. Peter said about purpose, most often than not, there's a report that IFAD did. They said that 50% of the remittances that come in go to the rural areas. And most of those things are to put food on the table. So unless the person sending the money actually specifies the purpose for which the money is sent, if they say it is for investment, they look for a company that is going to handle the investment opportunity, like we did for our clients. They look for maybe other banks and say, okay, yes, this percentage, when I send this money, this out of this money, keep it for this, keep it for cooperative. They look for maybe they are, like, for example, secondary school. Like in my secondary school, we have an association where sometimes we want to contribute to the development of our secondary school. We'll go there, we'll get everybody around who will now contribute money. Those that don't live in Nigeria send their own part in foreign currency. That's remittance. We'll now go and build whatever building we've all agreed on. Like now we are building a tennis court in, because my secondary school is FG Towari. We're building a tennis court for them. Those that don't live in Nigeria have contributed their own donation to it. That is development. So unless the person sending the money actually specifies the purpose in which they are sending the money, most often than not, many of the recipients will just take the money and just use it for whatever they want to. And there's also that issue about integrity. Sometimes when you give it, like you said, you give it to some people and they will just pocket the money. That's why some people are very, very particular about sending money through family and friends. I remember a case some years ago where someone sent $5,000 through a friend. Till date, his mother didn't see the money. And the other one does not pick up his phone, does not answer anything, does not answer anybody, does not email. So everything depends on individuals also. So as we're looking at all this, we also need to take all the variables into place, because all things being equal, remittance should actually work for economic development. But there are other variables that affect how they are being done. I hope I was able to touch on some things being raised by Dr. Amma and Mr. Peter.
Yes. The not picking up the phone is kind of funny.
I'm very serious. I'm very, very serious. Just disappeared.
Dan is not laughing.
Just disappeared with money. And we don't even know where it's amazing. How an 88-year-old lady, her son sent her money, and you just disappear with the $5,000. You don't pick phone. It's baffles. Sometimes when people do certain things, it baffles me. I'm serious.
I know of an instance where someone was building a house. The person lives abroad and was sending money for about, I think, 5 years, and came back and there was no house.
Can you
but
imagine?
They were getting receipts and getting pictures, but no house. So,
and that is remittance.
That's remittance. It's gone somewhere.
Because as it is, building the house, it created jobs for, if the person had actually used the money, it should have created jobs, if nothing else, for casual workers. The bricklayer will have job. The person mixing the cement will have a job. The person doing the decking will have a job. The person installing the windows will have a job. And will now have money to go and feed their own families. But people don't realize the multiply effects remittances have.
What Peter said about education still comes in. This is the gap that education has to fill, because with people being able to know that people don't know the implication of some of the things that they do out of ignorance, So it's like taking the chicken that lays the golden egg, and you eat it for today. you're full for today, but what happens for tomorrow? So that's the part where education plays a huge role in all of this.
You're right.
Well,
And I think Dr. Amma and all of us who have lived abroad can tell you that people believe we just pluck the money and send. I'm talking about to Nigeria, and they don't believe that they need to invest or about sustainability. They just believe that money flows. And something Stanley said about the banks, when you go to the bank to collect money, they have numbers of all the malams around.
Sure.
I'm sorry, but
Sure.
that's where you get your money from. I'm sorry, it's funny, but that's where you get your money from, not from the bank. I think that really has to be looked into. It's amazing.
yeah. Well, our time is just about up for today's discussion. And before we leave, I would like to ask each of you to share your thoughts or some ideas or suggestions of how we can use remittances to add value to the economy and, of course, move into a sustainable development. So who would like to get started? Stanley, Uwa?
Okay, maybe
Stanley,
I should go
ahead.
first.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Don't do ladies first this time around. Men first.
Okay, I would say remittances as a whole, just like we've rightly put out, is a huge tool. The numbers give credence to that. As a huge tool, it's money that could be used, that comes into the country, helps the country. But much more than just calling it the names that it is, and then everything that is being used for, we need to get creative. We need to think of ways of harnessing gold, harnessing other products from this gold that we have, not just in its raw form, refining the money that is coming in. How are the banks that are the recipients, that are supposed to be the channel for this, enabling it and making it easier for the recipients to get this, thereby increasing the flow, increasing the amounts that we get. Then for the people in the education system, how are we helping those recipients know that it's not just about receiving the money and squandering it? How can you put it to more productive use? So it's still on the part of the recipients, the channels that it's received, and still us that are in the country around Africa, because it's an African problem. It's when you realize issues that are raised, if it's the same thing happening in Nigeria, it's a similar thing happening in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, or Senegal. So how are the locals, how are we empowering the people through knowledge that you take out a portion of this personal finance, take a portion of this for savings, how are you taking a portion of this to create something for yourself so that you are sustainable, so that you by yourself and your family can build from that and transcend that into not just you but to generations. So I think those are the two angles that I will just that I'll speak on.
Okay.
Thank you.
For me, I think another thing the government should do is they need to find tools on how to actually measure remittances. Because without the statistics from remittance, they will not be able to, they will not be equipped to make good policy decisions that can help. Because that can help sustainable development. Because if they can measure, look, this is like, for example, it's like in accounting, budgeting. If I don't know how much I'm supposed to spend next year, I will not know what to buy. So they need to find a tool in which they can measure it accurately and try to standardize, if possible, the way they come up with agreements. Like in the Euro, they have some European countries, they have a standardized measure of payments. They need to do that. That's my own thing. Then they will now be able to see the multiplier effect that remittances has. They will now be, like Stanley said, they will now be able to implement it, educate people. People will no longer see it as, oh, my son is sending me $100 this week. What material should I go and buy them around? Whose wedding is there? Whose burial is there? I have to go and pay my age grade meeting, because that is in most times what you see in most rural areas in the East anyway.
Okay. Well, I think this financial education, like we all say, is what we need, because be it a micro business, personal or large business, when that remittance comes, it should go to the right channel. But that being said, integrity is a big part of it, because we all know what happens when money from abroad is sent. I think Dr. Amma got disconnected. Hopefully she'll be back in a minute. Nifemi, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I just want to say,
I think Dr. Amma and Nifemi are back. Okay, go ahead.
yes, on a final note, or rather on a lighter note, there is another active remittance that is taking place where young Africans, dupe white people for money and remit funds from the abroad. So I'm hoping that,
Am I
That is
audible
part of
again?
it, on accountability.
Am I
Well-
audible again?
Yes.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Okay. Well, what can I say? My
I mean, that's not
connectivity
remittance
failed.
now. That's fraud. That's not remittance.
Yes,
Mhm.
that would create a
That's
more
fraud.
sustainable structure that can discourage those kind of funds, because whether you like it or not, the image out there of a Nigerian, when you step out of this country, it continues to paint us in a very bad image. Let me
Well,
say to everyone
before we go, can I say something before we go very quickly? If I
Can hear
am
you.
audible.
Yes, you're
Am I
audible.
audible?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
All right then. I'm not sure what the others have said because I lost connection completely and I'm now on a mobile phone. But I think it's important for us to remember and recognize that remittances are revenue to a country and also income for those who are receiving it. And it is therefore important for us to invest this money into the progress of individuals, but also to the community and the countries in which these funds are going into. At the end of the day, if we're speaking of Africa, it is a young continent. There are a lot of youth members here. There's an issue of underemployment. There's an issue of unemployment. There's an issue of delayed completion of schooling. But most importantly, what we have here are the resources, a population that's eager to grow. And if we invest in that population using these remittances, there is no reason why the continent should not develop sustainably. And at the end of the day, let's always remember, others see the continent as a place for investment. And it is attractive to others, and it should be attractive to those who reside on the continent.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Doctor. I don't know if is Nifemi there?
Dr.
I have no idea.
I read.
Can you hear me?
Dr. Ma, I read that they actually celebrate. I think June 16th is International Day of Family Remittance. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I heard that. I heard that. I have not been invited to one. Then again, I think
I know that. I didn't know that.
yes, I saw that somewhere, but I do think that policies need to be tightened. Central banks need to have conversations so that there is some uniformity in terms of how this process occurs. And there has to be transparency, and it has to be a little bit more affordable. If it's the only way for some families to get funding, then perhaps my suggestion, my idea that some of this fund becomes some sort of an overseas fund that is overseen by many, not just by a few selected. It could help grow businesses on the continent. Those micro businesses could really use with an agency that is entrusted with that small portion that's set aside for development. This does not have to be a continent of remittances and gift giving. When you look at Kenya, when you look at even the Philippines, when you look at other countries, India was an example that was used earlier. They do get remittances, but they're also looking at their GDP in terms of that, because there has to be import and export, not just remittances coming into a country. Thank you for that. And I don't know if Nifemi is still there, but I thank you, Uwa, Stanley, Peter, and Nifemi, if you're still here. Thank you for joining this conversation. I look forward to having further discussions on this type of a topic, and who knows, perhaps there will be a change that will help to improve the economic situation and stabilize the economy for further development. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.